Another Dooley Noted Podcast comes to you from the Coach's Podcast Room at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill in Celebration Point. Okay, welcome into another Dooley Noted Podcast presented by Titan MRI from the Shackhow and Mercandone Studios. A little under the weather today, but we're going to gut it out. I think it's sinuses more than anything. I don't know what it is. It could be just me. Could be just that every once in a while I have to feel sick. But it is funny to think about how fast this season again is going. And they always do, and I know I talk about it all the time. But, we're past halfway now because we're on the Friday of technically week 8, but it's week 7 for the Gators. So we're past the halfway point. And it just feels like it's all of a sudden happened really fast. And a lot of the weeks have just flown by where you kind of go, wait a minute, it's Tuesday already? Or it's Thursday, or I got to do this today? Anyway, you don't want to hear about my problems. I know. We've got a great show for you today. Greg Sankey is going to join us, Commissioner of the SEC. Looking forward to our conversation with him. And, of course, we have all of our great stuff. The Adams Rib Go Gator of the week, and Leonardo's the Millhopper Quick Picks, and the Hester and Kipke Games of the week. And handle out 3 things. All those things are coming up. We'll start out, though, by talking about Florida LSU and just, it's been I thought Matt Baker did a really good job with talking about how weird this series been, and he did the 5 weirdest things, and you could do 50 weird things about Florida and LSU. I don't know why this game has just it's been crazy. It's been weird. And one of the points he made was that back-to-back years, Florida's quarterback got suspended before the LSU game. It was Will Greer and Treon Harris both got suspended. So, and then you had obviously all the fake field goals. They won 2 games with fake field goals. LSU did. The one game where they got a hold of Tebow's phone. That was the game where they converted 4 fourth downs with Jacob Hester just running. They couldn't stop him. That game was crazy. Tebow, with his fake phone in the end zone after he scored a touchdown to get on the students. And maybe the most bizarre game of all, because I listed my favorites here, games. And I didn't even list this one because of the backstory. I'll just give it to you real quick. But 1989, we had heard that Galen was about to get fired. He had gotten caught up in the Norm Sloan investigation, and while the NCAA was here, they found out a couple of things about him. One of them, to this day, he'll insist is not true. One of them was that he was giving his assistant, Xavier Uralian, money out of his pocket so that it wasn't all documented as far as the pay that he was getting. He shouldn't get fired for that. All right, but they were, at that point, Florida would have fired you for anything. They basically, Randy Reese was fired, I think, because of something that got caught up in that. But they were all trying to get Norm Sloan. That's what the NCAA was here for. They were trying to get Norm Sloan. There have been a lot of allegations about him cheating, and they finally did get him. In fact, I remember to this day the phone call I had to make to Norm Sloan's house. Not his cell phone. This was 1989. And I said, I called him. I said, Coach Sloan, it's Pat Dooley. We just wanted to give you a chance to respond now that they have let you go. And he said, you guys gave me a lot of effing chances, didn't you? And slammed the phone down. So we got along later in life. But it is funny because Norm Sloan and I had a great relationship after he got fired. Charlie Pell and I had a great relationship after he got fired. Huh. Ron Zook and I don't have a relationship after he got fired. It's weird that way. So there have been so many weird games, but that 89 game, just to go back, so we had heard this. We had sent people to the house, Galen's house, to confront him face to face, and he said, "Look, I'll talk to you guys after the game, but I'm not going to talk about anything now. But I'll talk to you after the game." And the decision was made not to go with the story. We didn't have it strong enough. In fact, part of the story that we had was inaccurate. It turned out in the end. So they go play the game. I'm not there. I'm watching the game on TV like a lot of people. And Florida gets down, and they have a 1 second left in the clock. And it actually shouldn't have been one. The clock had gone to 0, but the horn didn't sound. So because the horn hadn't sounded, there was technically like a millionth of a second on the clock. Because the horn sounds at exactly when it expires. So there was time on the clock. So they put it back to 1 second. Arden Krzyzewski comes in and kicks a field goal, who wasn't their regular kicker. John David Francis was. And he kicked the field goal. And to this day, every time I watch that guy, I don't think he made it. I think he was wide left. But they counted it, and Florida wins that game. And I remember my friend Jeff Brown, who worked for us at the Gainesville Sun, was sitting next to me on the couch. We were with our wives, and we just looked at each other and went, "Are you kidding me? This is the last game of Galen Hall's career, and he wins it on this," which is kind of cool, and I was happy for Galen, but I certainly was knowing what was coming. And then, of course, the next day, national news breaks the story that Galen's been let go, and Gary Darnell becomes the head coach. Ironically, Gary Darnell's wife worked at the Gainesville Sun. She worked in advertising. Didn't help us, though, in any way. But I was thinking about some of my favorite games, and obviously the number one favorite is the game from just 2016, where with the hurricane and moving to the end of the season, the way people reacted to that, and we're kind of media out there. I was not proud of my profession. The people in administration, I was not proud of them. They just did not understand the concepts of why you could not play the game, even though the skies were blue in Gainesville that day. We didn't know that, and we didn't know, more importantly, the EMS and first responders. None of those people knew that they weren't going to be working on something, or they were going to have to be moved away, and they were going to have to go to St. Augustine, for example, to help shore things up there. Anyway, and for Florida to win that game 16-10 and win the SEC. I mean, they've never had a chance to win the SEC before against LSU, because they usually play them in the middle of the year. That one, the 2001 game, when Rex Grossman just looked ridiculous. They won 44-15. I remember after the game, Spurrier just raving about Rex and how great he was. I go, that's not going to work out. Sure enough, next week they lose. He doesn't play good, they lose. Sometimes you just can't praise a guy. The 2003 game, 19-7, and that team from LSU won the national title. That was our only loss. But Florida, that was when we thought maybe Ron Zook's turning the corner here. Didn't work out. Sorry, I'm getting the hiccups from, I think I've got acid reflux too on top of everything else. I'm just falling apart. All right, and then the 1964 game, which I did not attend, but I listened to on the radio. Steve Spurrier was the quarterback for Florida. Of course, he and Tommy Shannon, and Florida won that game 20-6. It was a postponed game from a hurricane. So it's happened a lot. It always has seemed to be a weird game, and the games here were weird. I was just talking about the games in Baton Rouge. The games here have been weird, with different things happening. But that doesn't guarantee we're going to get weirdness in this game. All we know for sure is that Florida and LSU are coming in, and only one team's ranked. I think 26 times they've both been ranked, but only one team's ranked this year because of what LSU's dealing with. And the thing is, LSU has not done well stopping the run or running the ball, which whenever a team is really bad at those two things, I always wonder what their want to is. When you're not running the ball well and you aren't stopping the run, you have both those things going, Sometimes that's just effort. And what we don't know, and because I think I mentioned this Monday, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I get confused with all the radio and stuff that we do. You just wonder what's going on over there with, they're still dealing with this whole Title IX case, as we know. But all the players who are now out for the year, injured, they lost another one in Eli Ricks, who was an All-American as a freshman. Well, unbelievable. So they went this season with an All-American at one corner and an All-American at the other. Okay, I think he was a freshman All-American. He might have been third-team All-American, Eli Ricks. He had 4 picks last year. I don't remember much about his season last year, but he was obviously a good player. And Derek Stingley was an All-American. He's going to be in the top probably 10 of the draft this year. And he may be saying, my foot hurts. Let me get it all healed up for the combine. You don't know another, Ali Gay, their edge rusher, they announced yesterday he's out for the year. Originally, they said he was out for the game. He's out for the year. There's a bunch of guys they're missing. But this sounds vaguely familiar to a game last year against LSU. Maybe the fog will roll in. Maybe it'll be morning fog that'll roll in instead of evening fog. But it sounds a whole lot like it. That's why you can't take anything for granted. And who knows how many of these Florida LSU regular, one every year games we're going to have, how much longer we're going to have it. It's going to be kind of the end of the series. But, LSU's 3-3 right now, but they have won 8 out of 11 against Florida. One thing that happened is Steve Spurrier, when he was at Florida, he dominated that series. He dominated as a player, 3-0, 11-1 as a coach. And that's the only reason Florida has the advantage, because in the last, I'll tell you, since Tebow left is when the 8-11 has happened. 8-3. They have won 8 out of 11 games, and they've won 2 in a row. So, you sit here and you look at the math and you look at the way the spread has changed. I think it originally was at 3, and it's gotten all the way up to like 10.5. No, I'm sorry. The last one I saw, and this is the one we're going to go with today, is 12. It keeps going up, and that means the money is coming in on the Gators because they've got to drive it up. So interesting stuff. So we'll get to all that. We'll talk about it a little bit more. We'll also get to the baseball. We want to talk a little bit about the baseball, just a little bit. It's going to be an interesting Saturday for me with baseball and everything else going on. Right now, though, we got to take our break, and then we're going to bring on the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, Greg Sankey. We can't wait to talk to him. We'll be right back after this break on Another Dooley Noted Podcast.
Titan MRI, North Central Florida's premier independent diagnostic testing MRI facility. At Titan MRI, we're focused on you, the patient, having a great customer experience. Our MRI equipment is modern and 75% quieter than any unit in its class. And our MRI unit has one of the largest openings of any of the newer high-strength MRI units, which allows comfortable scanning for potential claustrophobic and larger patients. At Titan MRI, we look forward to serving you.
Car accidents, trucking accidents, motorcycle accidents, and wrongful death. If injured or killed by the negligence of others, who will fight for the compensation you deserve? Shakow and Mercadante, 5 lawyers, more than 100 years of combined legal experience, millions.
Titan MRI, North Central Florida's premier independent diagnostic testing MRI facility. At Titan MRI, we're focused on you, the patient, having a great customer experience. Our MRI equipment is modern and 75% quieter than any unit in its class. And our MRI unit has one of the largest openings of any of the newer high-strength MRI units, which allows comfortable scanning for potential claustrophobic and larger patients. At Titan MRI, we look forward to serving you. Titan MRI, North Central Florida's premier
car accident.
Another Duly Noted Podcast comes to you from the Coach's Podcast Room at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill and Celebration Point. You can watch and listen to us on Facebook and YouTube for every podcast that we do on Mondays and Fridays at 2 o'clock. Listen to the podcast whenever on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, any of the other 39 platforms where you can find this podcast or your favorite podcast. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section below or call me if you want to do some advertising at 352-317-3444. Hello there, everybody. I'm Pat Dooley, of course, from Another Dooley Noted Podcast. And this is a great Adam Brewer, and he's just opened up a place here, Adam Brewer to go. What gave me the idea to do this, to have a to-go place?
We really like the fast concept, being able to get the barbecue. Now we have this new online ordering. So before it was a call ahead carry out, quick service. We have like a curbside kind of a deal where everything's ready to go for you. And then we thought, wow, we have a really great dine-in concept, but how can we make this streamlined for the customer and make it easy and accessible for all parts of town?
Adam's Rib Co. to go. Come on down and enjoy it.
Great food, great atmosphere, a diverse menu, everything made from scratch, plenty of space, and locally owned. These are all the characteristics of a great restaurant, and you can find each and every one of them right here in Gainesville at Ballyhoo Grill. Ballyhoo Grill prepares all of their food fresh every day, from their salad dressing to their award-winning soups. Bring your family and enjoy dinner under the Tim Trebo Tiki Hut while listening to live music. Or if you're running low on time to eat out, they also deliver through Uber Eats, Bite Squad, and Postmates. A Gainesville staple that's been open for over 30 years. Check out Ballyhoo Grill on Facebook or at ballyhoogrill.com.
Another Duly Noted Podcast is sponsored in part by the Gainesville Quarterback Club, where they have unbelievable speakers every week during football season. It is an incredible club. It's just like being in a family. I go there every Saturday or every Tuesday. Sometimes I go there on Saturday and there's nobody there, but I go there every Tuesday. You should too. You should be part of it. It's good to be part of a community thing like this, as well as the unbelievable food and speakers and everything that goes on there. I highly recommend it. The Gainesville Quarterback Club. Please come and join. Okay, welcome back to another Duly Noted Podcast, and it is a great pleasure to bring on our guest today, the Commissioner of the Southeastern Conference and the ruler of the free world, Greg Sankey. How are you, Greg?
Well, I would not want the responsibility for all in the free world. I have enough on my plate with 14, soon to be 16 universities, so that's enough.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. I think we've talked a little bit about this week here because the Florida-LSU rivalry has been so intense for multiple reasons, which you're aware of, including hurricanes and stuff like thrown shoes and stuff like that. But we don't know if Florida-LSU 5 years from now will be a regular game, but just because we and I'm sure you aren't 100% sure what's going to happen with the scheduling.
I'm not. We've had 2 in-person meetings of athletics directors and spent some time with presidents and chancellors actually this week, updating them on our transition status. So we're focused on the 25 season. We made that announcement pretty clearly. That provides us some time to think. And my encouragement to our membership has been to take a step back from the way we've always done it, look at the big picture of options, and then we'll start to narrow. And one of so that's kind of the second, the first principle I've identified is let's look at the big picture. Second is how do we rotate teams through our campuses with greater frequency. A really good example this year, we had Alabama in Gainesville playing Florida. A long time between occurrences of that
10
happening.
years,
Yeah, and we'll have some teams that won't host the other division opponent for 12 years. And that's too long. And so we're going to have to adjust, and that will impact some, what I would call secondary rivalries. Not that they're not important rivalries, but those may happen on a different cadence to help us, particularly as we accommodate these really big brands, along with our existing big brands, to rotate through more frequently.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. When you talk, I know that 2025 is when the 2 schools are supposed to come in here. Is that what you're thinking is the way it's going to go because of what's going on in the Big 12 in terms of the way they've added some teams and stuff like? You're just shooting for 2025?
That's our focus. Both University of Oklahoma and University of Texas have existing relationship and agreements with the Big 12, and that's really very different than we've seen in past expansion realities and efforts. Even though I think I've read any number of articles that no one has waited that long, the reality is we have contemplated a respectful and orderly transition. It's always difficult when you go through these circumstances, but being respectful and orderly gives us that time focused on 2025. And it's really about the relationship between the two universities in the Big 12, not about the relationship with us. And the reason that July 1st, 2025 is the focus is because of their media rights agreements concluding, which provides them a level of consideration to adjust. And obviously they're coming here. Should something different happen, we'll prepare to adjust, and we'll be thinking and nimble. But the focus, Pat's on 2025.
Well, I know that we've had a couple of meetings take place with all the Power 5 conferences and trying to and other conferences trying to come up with the playoffs expansion that we've talked about. You've been very clear. You just can stay at 4. You're good at 4. Have you changed your view on this at all, or because you were part of the group that came up with the 12-team playoff? So,
right.
But I don't know how you feel about it. If you feel any differently about it now.
Well, not really. I've been, I think, pretty specific in my comments. So I was asked to join a format working group over 2 years ago. And the charge was to go through a review of the 14 playoff. We were at that point right at halfway of a 12-year cycle. And just people have to understand that back in 2012, 2013, when the CFP was implemented, the contracts between the CFP and the media entity, ESPN, was a 12-year agreement. And the focus was on going through an entire 12-year cycle before adjustment would take place. Now, at the bowl level, those were pretty much 6-year agreements that were renewed. And so here we are. We're now in year 8. We've been through 7 years looking at the future. It was a time when we're going to have to look at the format anyway. So we start there. Just because we want or people want to change doesn't mean you can just change and ignore those agreements that exist. And that has to be understood. So just because people say, let's do something other than 4, it doesn't just happen. And we spent a couple of years as a format working group taking a deep dive into, I think we identified over 60 options, everything from retaining the current 14 format to tweaking that a little bit. I think we maxed out really at 16, but we actually had a brief conversation about 24 teams in a playoff only because the FCS model has that. Mm-hmm. So I walk in the first meeting and say, hey, 4 works. It has worked, it is working, and it continue to work. But I had a responsibility to kind of check the logo at the door, despite the criticism and tension around membership transition that's occurred. And take a step back and say, if we were to update the model, if we were to update the college football playoff format, what makes the most sense across the board? And that's where 12 teams was identified. There's an interest in the supermajority of participating entities, which is 10 conferences plus the University of Notre Dame, to have assured access for a set of conference champions. So that's very different than this 4 best team model. On the other hand, a number of us are motivated to make sure we have the best teams in the playoff. I don't think the playoff has credibility if we don't ensure the participation of the best teams. We also at 12 teams can potentially go early with our media partner, but we can also use existing bowl games to feature both the modern presentation of the postseason in college football, but also the traditions. And I've certainly been open to that. I'm supportive of that model. And you've read about, heard concerns expressed by some of my colleagues, and my observation is, hey, I'm fine staying at 4. If that's the reality, is people aren't aren't ready to take the next step on format, we don't need to be just taking incremental steps. Like 4 to 6 solves nothing. Right. If you listen to the concerns. And so let's take a bit of a leap here. I think we can keep the game healthy. I think we bring a lot more teams in. We're trying to name a national champion, and we have to have teams involved national. And we haven't seen the Pac-12 in, but I think 2 out of 7 years. We've had other of our colleague conferences miss the opportunity. So at the Autonomy 5 level, only the SEC and the ACC have been in every year in this thing. And we've got to think differently if we want to have a national sport like college football truly is expected to be.
Yeah, I mean, and the trouble is, I don't know that there's a way to do this and get all the conference champions in and all the best teams in at the same time. You know what I mean? I mean, it's almost like it's because you're going to get conference champions that are going to end up 9-3. You know, it's a tough call on that.
It is, and so the model, when you think about 12 teams, it is the 6 most highly rated conference champions and the 6 most highly rated teams that are not conference champions. And if you look back over the 7 past years, in 3 of those 7 years, the 12 teams in the playoff were ranked as the top 12. In 4 of the 7 years, 11 of the top 12 ranked teams were in. The 12th team would be that 6th conference champion that ranged in ranking, I think, between 14 and 20. So there's a pretty small delta between that last highly ranked team, number 12, and that conference champion. Well, what you do with that conference champion model is you bring a whole lot of people into the conversation in November. So one of the things to understand is, at the outset, the college football playoff said we want to respect the regular season. The regular season is enormously important. We don't want to diminish it. But we do have to be honest. We have altered the focus, particularly if a team's got really high expectations, comes into November and is not in that top 10 or 12, which if you're not in the top 10 or 12 going into the first ranking set of the college football playoffs, you're generally not going to be in the top 4. And it's almost an absolute. So how do we bring people into the game throughout the season as part of this conversation? And yep, you're going to have a discussion about the viability of certain conference champions, but at least the 7-year data set we can evaluate suggests only one of those teams is going to be well outside that 12. And so what it means is you got 6 most highly rated conference champions and then 6 best remaining teams, which is a model that exists around national championships at the college level for the balance between automatic bids and at-large access in general terms.
I was going to ask you about NIL and transfer portal, but I feel this way, and maybe you feel differently, that this thing is a process that is going to happen organically. And 5 years from now, I'll be able to tell you what the transfer portal's meant, and what NIL is meant. But to base it just on the first year of NIL and the first year of being able to transfer, we know that college football seems like it's evened out a little bit more just because you can go. Florida went and built its entire middle of its defensive line in the transfer portal this year, for example. But I do believe NIL is an ongoing thing that we're not going to know the real impact of it for a long time, for a while anyway.
What you're identifying is points of either discomfort or uncertainty in college sports relative to what we experienced for decades. And the really interesting aspect is we've lived a year and a half with uncertainty around COVID-19. So if there's a better time to just be managing uncertainty, I'm not sure when it would be, but right now we're kind of accustomed to it. But on those 2 issues, I think to a certain extent, you're right. So let's just take transfers. And we label it the transfer portal. And we have to be clear, I think, in our terms, at least for me, because what I get said gets repeated. So the transfer portal is just an online declaration of, hey, I'm leaving. That's all that does. What's more substantive now is the ability to transfer and participate in another school without serving a year in residence. And that's where, to your point about teams rebuilding certain aspects or involving transfer students, usually there'd be a year wait and then you'd have the chance to play. So that year wait has gone away. You know what's really interesting, Pat, is if you go back to 2018, 2019, at the college level, we had instituted this play 4 games before you use a season of competition rule. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Remember how, like, 3 Septembers ago, we saw the Clemson starting quarterback be displaced, and he says, I'm out of here. He ends up in one of our –
Kelly Bryant, yep.
And we saw that happen repeatedly. You've heard none of that conversation this year. That issue is completely overshadowed. Now, you see people who've said, hey, I'm transferring. You've got young people now who are looking at their future probably based upon their playing time. So that's going to become a bit of a natural occurrence. All of us involved in these changes have said that's reality. That's the adaptation to reality and the cultural expectation that we not be restricting decision-making, access to financial aid. We do all have an expectation that coaches don't turn other teams' rosters into their personal recruiting playground. And that's an ethical consideration for our coaches. And we have to be mindful of that. On the NIL issue, that's playing out in real time right now. So you had a California state law, then a Florida state law. And so the state laws have forced change. And then there was a decision at the Supreme Court level in late June that essentially said the NCAA's rules are going to be subject to full antitrust scrutiny, and that limits the NCAA's ability to regulate. So those of us in college athletics have said, for us to have a national standard, which our student athletes are asking for, by the way, a national standard, Congress is going to have to act. And I'll just make 2 quick points. One is, if you're a high school senior right now being recruited by universities, and let's just pick a number, 10 different states, we're expecting high school seniors and their families to evaluate 10 different state laws. That's not fair to that young person. It's hard enough to figure out your life direction at this point as a senior in high school without adding these economic issues that are completely unclear. So that's one. The second is, we have seen literally dozens of businesses run into this space with a label that they're going to help student athletes. We want to help you use your name, image, and likeness. We want to help you jump into this economic activity. There is no regulatory oversight of that business activity, none. In fact, some state laws bar universities from engaging with their student athletes in that kind of oversight activity. That's a risk. And what's interesting is there's not been the level of really objective scrutiny of this activity. We're going to have young people sign deals that are exploitive, that tie their name, image, and likeness rights up well beyond the minimal payments they're going to receive. And yeah, there's extreme, really good examples, and I'm pleased to see that. You know, we have a gymnast at Florida who's at LSU is probably one of the success stories. A couple of basketball players at Fresno State. We've got them at Florida, at Georgia, all across the league. What we don't want is a tipping point where we've got booster activity in the middle of recruiting and people signing name, image, and likeness deals there's really no activity taking place. It's just payments.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of payments, you guys have been able to collect a lot of payments lately from teams rushing the field. Now, I know that goes to charity. And as a journalist, as a sports writer who's been on the field, and really one time, and it was in Starkville, I think it was, really almost got hit by a goalpost. So I'm against people storming the field, but no matter how much you fight them, they're still going to do it. And I don't know that there's an answer to that.
Well, we're going to have to get creative in our thinking. So we were creative. We're the only conference that applies a financial penalty. One can debate whether it's enough or not, because we're still seeing these moments. And on the one side, everybody's happy, it's great, but when you hear stories about people on the field, there are problems. And outside the league, there was a game years ago, probably 10, 12, 15 years ago, where a goalpost comes down, strikes somebody in the head, and they end up in a coma. That's dangerous. Other circumstances of people being bumped or pushed, we instituted our fine.
Yeah, players
well,
getting
that's
bumped.
Next, when Billy's team had such a great run, we had a court rushing incident. A couple players got pushed back, and now you've got the potential for some real ugliness to happen. And the student athlete shouldn't have to be worried about their own safety in that moment, nor should a head coach or an assistant coach. And so we're going to have to think differently about these moments. On the other hand, what you don't want to do is create a crush of people where people are injured because there's so much emotion. And I think part of what we're seeing right now is there's more pent-up emotion around our games and our fans than maybe has been there. And I would attribute that to people not being in the stadium, being isolated from each other. They're back together in these big moments, and they just want a little bit of joy again. Well, you can be joyful in the stands. And in the SEC, we want to expect to have those moments as opposed to having to occupy the playing field and creating some tense situations that eventually we're going to have real problems. And so it is, I had a call this morning about how we deal with these things going forward. And there aren't simple solutions, but we can't be inattentive to, as much as it may be fun and memorable. And I will confess, I did it once during my master's enrollment at Syracuse University when they beat Nebraska. When I was a late comer to the field, there are problems that can arise and become very, very serious and very negative.
I hate to say it, but when I was in college, I did storm the basketball court one time.
We were all young. Well, what we're trying to do is help people become wiser quicker. That's what we're trying to think about.
Well, last question for you, and we appreciate your time here as always. But do you have a feeling for when we're going to know what the playoff? I mean, is there? It doesn't feel like there's a definite date. We'll have an answer for you what the playoff's going to look like on this date, or is it just going to continue to go through meetings and until we get there?
Well, the 12-team format, just to think through the timing, was introduced publicly June 10th with the idea that at the end of September we'd come back together for points of feedback. So the fact there hasn't been a decision at this time is not a surprise to me. You can forget the Oklahoma and Texas transition, which caused some tension, obviously, and these people have anonymously reported that tension, as I read the quote. And so you put that aside, that was another data point for everyone to consider. And I really believe we'd be in this conversation at this point. And so really, from Greg Sankey's perspective, we're exactly where I would have expected. Now, we do have to bring it to conclusion, Pat. So there are two answers to the question in my mind. One is to go early, which would really be the 24 and 25 seasons, which means we're talking about the national championship game in January 25 and January 26. We have to make decisions about host cities and locations, and that clock is ticking. So is there a shot clock? Right. Certainly. And I think over the next 90 days or so, that shot clock is going to wind down. Now, if we don't make a decision, we'll remain with the 14 playoff through the 12-year cycle. And if there's no early change, you can then plot out, well, you go to the 26th season, you think about 27, you probably have another, 12 months, if that, to make a decision. But as we go into a new cycle, past year 12, there's not an unlimited amount of time, but there's obviously another 6 to 12 months max, because you then have to start placing games on dates, making decisions about host sites, and in particular, naming a championship host site and having the time for them to prepare is no easy task. That's why the timing is really linked to something other than just meetings and gathering people. It truly is about making decisions and being able to plot out sites and dates well in advance so the preparations can provide the kind of nationally excellent competition and support for our student athletes and our fans that we all want to be a part of.
Hey, we got a Facebook question for you. Is alcohol consumption at SEC stadiums a conference agreement or a specific school decision?
We used to have a conference ban, conference prohibition on selling alcohol in public seating areas around our competitions. We now have policies on how that can be done, and our schools decide whether to permit the sale subject to our conference policies. And we have a mix. We have some who do and some who don't across the league, but we've allowed some of that flexibility, again, subject to conference policies.
I can't imagine what your phone's been like for the last year and a half. I mean, dealing with COVID, dealing with this. I mean, at some point, somebody called you and said, "Hey, we're interested in coming to your league. Would you be on the expansion committee for the playoffs?" I mean, your phone, when it rings, you never know what's going to be on the other end.
Well, you want like a real life example. So if you go back a year, right around now, if you remember, this would have been the time. So I'm trying to think, the 26th, then we played the 2nd, the 9th, the 16th. So it would have been essentially this week. We had our first disruptions in football scheduling because of COVID.
Right.
And that was Florida and Vanderbilt. Both of those phone calls were earlier in the week, which was a learning experience. If we were going to have a problem, we'd learn before Friday. But every Friday, Pat, was just there was agony because we had tested on Thursday and we waited probably from about 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. to access the results to figure out if teams would be able to play. You never knew what phone calls were going to come in. And that's just a narrow sliver of things. There was a Saturday where I rode out. I just started, my phone rang at 7 a.m. I was out on a run. It was a tropical storm that was moving through, and we had some rain, so I'm soaking wet. The phone rings. It's a head football coach. Something had happened on the network. I don't get many of those calls. And I just started writing out that day all of the things that happened. And I literally ended with just an unfortunate officiating outcome, which, they're human. But in between that first call and that last call I noted, we had tropical storm issues, we had kickoff delay issues, we had, hey, my public health official saying this about my defensive backs coach. I mean, and that's just a small sliver of reality.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Couldn't be a better person to take the SEC through it. And we're so happy to have you as a guest again on the show. And thank you so much for joining us, Greg. And stay safe. I know you're an avid reader and an avid runner. So you're doing great stuff there, unlike me, who's just sitting around, being retired.
7-mile run this morning with Joe Tessitore of ESPN.
Oh, really?
Holy moly fame. So he was in town, and I'm reading a book on the pandemic, actually, trying to learn a little bit about how we continue forward now. And you know what? There's something else out there. So whatever we can learn about decision-making, decision-making structures will help us next time. Yeah,
and that's got to make you a little nervous. Even though we're filling all these stadiums, you kind of go, I know that I sit there and go, I don't know about this.
Yeah, I've said we've learned how to manage through COVID, but we don't have control of COVID. And I think there's a little bit of naivete that, hey, everything's just fine. And we've reminded our athletics directors, when we have coaches groups, it's been a topic still, even with spring sport coaches, to say, this thing's just not going away. Mm-hmm. And even though we're now seeing the downward trends in positivity rates, hospitalizations, and deaths, it could rear its head. So we've got to be mindful of keeping healthy. And I think that's true for all of us. The good news is outdoors, we haven't had any indication of spread, but our teams have to be mindful in meeting rooms and as they travel and as they move around on the road.
Greg, thanks again for joining us. I appreciate your time, buddy, and enjoy calling you a friend, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Pat. Look forward to seeing you in Omaha sometime.
All right, my man.
Okay.
I hope so. I'd love to be there. Greg Sankey, Commissioner of the SEC, joining us here on Another Dooley Noted Podcast, and we're so happy to have him on. Great guy. Of course, presented by Titan MRI, Another Dooley Noted Podcast is, and make sure to mention that, and the Shack Al Mercandani Studios. So he was not in the Shack Al Mercandani Studios. We are in the Shack Al Mercandani Studios. He was in the SEC offices. There. So to get all that. So I hope we were able to answer some questions for you there. I thought it very interesting, and as he always is. All right, we got to get to all of our stuff. You know what I need? Look at that hair. What the heck is going on here? I look like a Beatle, like the flop Beatles, when they first came out. Yeah. That's right, Paul. I think it would be a great song. Except I don't think the Beatles had gray hair then, did they? Not in the early 60s? No, wasn't great. All right, take a break. We'll come back and we will do all of our good stuff, all of our stuff that's fun to do. here on Another Dooley Noted Podcast.
Car accidents, trucking accidents, motorcycle accidents, and wrongful death. If injured or killed by the negligence of others, who will fight for the compensation you deserve? Shakow and Mercadante, 5 lawyers, more than 100 years of combined legal experience, millions in settlements and verdicts. Call Shakow and Mercadante, 371-3000. Rebuilding lives.
Titan MRI, North Central Florida's premier independent diagnostic testing MRI facility. At Titan MRI, we're focused on you, the patient, having a great customer experience. Our MRI equipment is modern and 75% quieter than any unit in its class. And our MRI unit has one of the largest openings of any of the newer high-strength MRI units, which allows comfortable scanning for potential claustrophobic and larger patients. At Titan MRI, we look forward to serving you.
Another Duly Noted Podcast comes to you from the Coach's Podcast Room at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill and Celebration Point. You can watch and listen to us on Facebook and YouTube for every podcast that we do on Mondays and Fridays at 2 o'clock. Listen to the podcast whenever on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, any of the other 39 platforms where you can find this podcast or your favorite podcast. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section below or call me if you want to do some advertising at 352-317-3444. Another Duly Noted Podcast is sponsored in part by the Gainesville Quarterback Club, where they have unbelievable speakers every week during football season. It is an incredible club. It's just like being in a family. I go there every Saturday or every Tuesday. Sometimes I go there on Saturday and there's nobody there, but I go there every Tuesday. You should too. You should be part of it. It's good to be part of a community thing like this, as well as the unbelievable food and speakers and everything that goes on there. I highly recommend it. The Gainesville Quarterback Club. Please come and join. Hello there, everybody. I'm Pat Dooley, of course, from Another Dooley Noted Podcast. And this is a great Adam Brewer, and he has just opened up a place here, Adam Brewer To Go. What gave you the idea to do this, to have a to-go place like this?
We really like the fast concept, being able to get the barbecue. Now we have this new online ordering. So before it was a call ahead carry out, quick service. We have like a curbside kind of a deal where, everything's ready to go for you. And then we thought, wow, we have a really great dine-in concept, but how can we make this streamlined for the customer and make it easy and accessible for all parts of town?
Adam's Rib Co. To Go. Come on down and enjoy it.
Great food, great atmosphere, a diverse menu, everything made from scratch, plenty of space, and locally owned. These are all the characteristics of a great restaurant, and you can find each and every one of them right here in Gainesville at Ballyhoo Grill. Ballyhoo Grill prepares all of their food fresh every day, from their salad dressing to their award-winning soups. Bring your family and enjoy dinner under the Tim Trebo Tiki Hut while listening to live music. Or if you're running low on time to eat out, they also deliver through Uber Eats, Fight Squad, and Postmates. A Gainesville staple that's been open for over 30 years. Check out Ballyhoo Grill on Facebook or at ballyhoogrill.com.
Okay, we're back here on Another Duly Noted Podcast, and appreciate, again, Greg Sankey for coming on. I did want to mention the baseball. Obviously, I have a great interest in it. My 2 favorite teams are in the Final Four. I did not stay up and watch that game last night. It sounds like it was a great game, but it was a 2-1 game. I mean, it's not that exciting. But obviously the way it ended is going to be the subject of a lot of controversy. But what are you going to do? You can't do anything about it. I mean, the check swing, he clearly checked his swing. The pool reporter talked to the umpire who rung him up at first base umpire, and he said that, it's the hardest call in baseball, but I thought I saw him go around. And then they asked him, they said, well, now that you've watched it on video, what do you think? And the head umpire broke in and goes, no, we're not going to talk about it now that he's watched it. And again, I don't know. Do they need to have robot umpires? I don't know. It's part of baseball, but I feel bad for the Giants. Now we got to play the Dodgers. Braves had to play the Dodgers. That's never fun. They're really good. Of course, Atlanta, L.A., Boston, and Houston. The Final Four. Houston will be without Lance McCullers. Tightness in his forearm. He is out. He's not on their roster. So that'll be interesting. Going forward for their series with the Red Sox. The Red Sox are my other favorite team. And a lot of people have told me you're not allowed to do that, but I who says I'm not? I say I am. And it's my life. You could be a fan of two teams. And I started being a Red Sox fan in '67, the Impossible Dream season. So it's not like I just jumped on board when they started winning. I went through a lot of hell. I broke a lamp in the Anaheim Marriott the night of the where they won the game. The Mets won that game on the Buckner play. Anyway, whatever it's called. Is there a name for that? The whiff? I don't know. All right, here we go with our fun stuff that we like to do here, and we appreciate all of our sponsors so much. We love them. Love them. All right, we'll start out with the Adams Rib Co. to go Gator of the Week. And Adams Rib Co. to go is just killing it over there. Every time I go over there, there's a ton of people, but they get you right in and out, in and out, in and out. It's a great concept for Adam to do, and it's doing really well over there. The trouble with Gator of the Week this week is it was hard to find somebody because none of the other sports played. Women's tennis, but they're not even playing tournaments that matter. They matter maybe to them. So obviously volleyball wasn't playing. Soccer wasn't. I don't think they played this week, but I'm sure they didn't win. In fact, I think they lost in overtime. So anyway, I decided to go with our Gator of the Week, Adams Rib Co. to go Gator of the Week, being Jaden Gibson, who just committed to Florida. And it gives Florida now 3 4-star receivers coming in. So he's the number one receiver in the state of Florida. Big get for Dan Mullen and the boys. And again, he's not here yet. He hasn't signed. I've never seen the kid. He walked in here today. I wouldn't know him. But they're certainly building up that receiving core. And of course, if they can get Evan Stewart, who's the 5-star that they really are after hard, if they can get him, man, they're just going to keep refueling. Of course, they'll have to find a quarterback that can throw in the ball and get it done. All right. So that is our Adams Rib Co. to go Gator of the Week, Jaden Gibson, and look forward to hopefully, seeing him on campus here. All right. Our time for our Leonardo's at Millhopper quick picks. And I got to get over there. I went over there, and he brought food into us. I need to go over there and eat food over there. I've just been so busy. But our Leonardo's and Millhopper quick picks, which everybody loved. By the way, only one person qualified from the Thursday night game. Only one person picked the Eagles and took the 9 points, and they were the only one that won. I think it was Matt Fail was the one who did qualify. There was a ton of people that got in, but he was the only one that actually qualified. So we're going to give you 2 things for this weekend's game, for Saturday's game. They're not hard. But Florida is now up to a 12-point favorite. That is very tempting not to take Florida because that's a lot of points. These teams, I think 6 of the last 7 have come down to one-possession games. The one that didn't was the 42-28 game where Florida lost to the national champs, and Florida was right there in the game right till the very end. In fact, Derek Stingley had a big pick in the end zone in that game. But here are your 2 things on the Leonardo's and Millhopper quick picks. Florida minus 12 at LSU. You're going to take the Gators and give the 12 points. That's tough to do, but I understand where everybody feels like this is a foregone conclusion, but I know better. And then the other one is which team will have the most turnovers. You could guess tie. You could guess that as well. But which team will have the most turnovers, which should have a lot to do with the game. So that's our Leonardo's and Millhopper quick picks. All right, it is time for our Hand Law. 3 things. 3 things is brought to you by Hand Law, a Florida law firm which helps clients with government. You can learn more about Hand Law by visiting its website at www.hand.law. The firm is available for consultation in Jacksonville. We love Chris Hand and Hand Law. Number 1, Bucks. We just mentioned the Bucks won. They won again last night. They didn't play great. It's like it's weird that with Brady, it's like you say, "Oh, I think I see some flaws. I think I see maybe he is losing it," and then they'll throw like 3 straight dimes, and next thing you know, they're up. But it was a struggle for him. And Jalen Hurts actually was pretty good at times last night, but there were times when he was just awful. I would not be happy if he was my quarterback, to be honest with you. So, but the Bucs do win again. It feels like they're biding time till they get to the playoffs. And it's going to be a long time because we got a 400-game season this year, it seems like. All right, number 2, this is the most wonderful time of the year right now. It's not Christmas. It's right around here because we have just so much going on. Obviously, college football, and it's really getting interesting. It gets more interesting every week. The NFL, which is the king. NHL has started. NBA starts in a week and a half. You even have golf going on, baseball playoffs down to the Final Four. It is the coolest time. In fact, Wednesday there was no games on TV, no athletic events. And I was like, what do? I don't have anything to do. I can't watch anything. I found a movie. All right, finally, number 3, interesting story in Oklahoma where student newspaper went to a building, got up on the building, which was legal, and used binoculars and found out that they found out who the starting quarterback was going to be, at least who was taking the most reps for the first team. There's a lot going on with this Oklahoma thing with Spencer Rattler, who was the Heisman Trophy favorite and now is about to be benched for the 3rd time, I think, this year. Then they cut off some access. They didn't want it's tough. The problem you have is when you report something like that, and I understand why you would, and you're doing your job, but then you call Spencer Rattler's dad to tell him, that made me going, this is where coaches get really mad and don't allow some access because of that. So I do get it from both sides, but, Oklahoma students those guys made a name for themselves, so that's good for them. All right, that is the hand law, 3 things. And finally today, Hesser and Kepke's games of the week. Hesser and Kepke is a law firm based in Hale Plantation. I wrote something down here that I wrote the wrong thing down, but I got the right thing now. Hesser and Kepke is a law firm based in Hale Plantation, specializing in employment, workers' comp, and family law. Visit their website at www.hklawfl.com or call Ken and Jennifer at 339-9920. We are running out of time here. Here's our games of the week. SEC, I'm going with Kentucky, Georgia, even though it's a 22.5-point spread. To me, that's the game that has the most impact on any race right now. So, yeah, you got to go with that game. That is the biggest game in the SEC, even with that giant spread. And personally, I think Kentucky is going to get steamrolled. I think Georgia physically will just shut down the run, and that'll be it. The game of the week in the state, I think it's at Cincy, but it's UCF playing at Cincy just because of where Cincy is in this whole playoff picture. So I think that is, now again, 21.5-point spread. But, the other games aren't exactly that exciting, to be honest with you. The national game of the week to me is Oklahoma State at Texas. Oklahoma State's undefeated. Texas has played really good, blew that league. Will Texas have enough mentally to overcome that terrible loss last week? Terrible loss. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So it's only a 4-point spread. And then the under the radar game is Ole Miss at Tennessee, just because you got to watch that. You got to watch that game. The over-under's like 84 points. They're expecting this unbelievable game. 2.5-point favorite for Ole Miss going on the road. That could be the game of the day in terms of just watchability. Some of the other, we gave you the other spreads as we always do with the Hesser and Kipke spreads on Monday. Some of them have adjusted a little bit, but not a whole lot. I'm curious to see what Alabama at 17 at Mississippi State, if they're able to handle their loss. And Saban's pretty good at that, and they'll probably be okay. But if some things don't go well and the offense is, how those things go. So anyway, thanks again to Hesser and Kipke for their games of the week here on Another Dooley Noted Podcast, live from the Shack Out at Mercandone Studios, and that'll do it. We'll get out of here. Thanks again to Greg Sankey. We've got our guest book for the next 4 shows. Matt Baker's Monday from the Tampa Times. I love Matt Baker. We have Andy Staples Friday, and then I think it's Robbie, and then I can't remember who else. I got them booked, okay? That's the point is I've got them booked, so I don't have to complain about anything. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Thanks so much to Evan for, again, doing a bang-up job as a producer. Until next time, I am Pat Dooley. I am deep, I'm way back, and I am out of here.